I'm very impressed with Mr. Gulen for several reasons. His emphasis on education, his emphasis on science and the role of science and what Islam has to say about science and how we can apply that to our modern civilization in the 21st century, and also his very, very great emphasis on dialogue. We often see there is a need around the world. Myself, any evidence of a hidden agenda when we were My name is Andrew Griswold, and I live just outside of Boston in Massachusetts, and I work in Cambridge. My job is at our church, which is called St. Paul's Roman Catholic Church in Cambridge, and I am the business manager for the church, which means I take care of accounting and managing the facility and those sorts of things. I first met people from the Hizmet movement in maybe 2007 or maybe a little bit earlier. There was an organization in Boston at that time called Boston Dialogue Foundation. It's affiliated with Hizmet movement in Turkey, and one of their main projects was to organize trips to Turkey for Americans to go and visit. In 2007, a friend of ours and her husband went on a trip with the Boston Dialogue Foundation with Ibrahim Sayar, our friend. And then the following year, 2008, my wife, Deirdre, and I had an opportunity to visit. So we went on that trip in July 2008, and we were in Turkey for about 2 weeks or so, and we traveled around. I can tell you later cities we visited. And since returning from Turkey, we have stayed in touch with Hizmet community here in Boston through a Turkish Cultural Center, which opened shortly after we returned from Turkey, and also Peace Islands Institute here. I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Gülen. Of course, as we know, he is living here in the United States, and I have not read a great deal of his writing myself, but sometimes I read Fountain magazine and some of the other publications. I'm very impressed with Mr. Gülen for several reasons. His emphasis on education, his emphasis on science and the role of science and what Islam has to say about science and how we can apply that to our modern civilization in the 21st century. And also his very, very great emphasis on dialogue with other faiths and other cultures. So I think he is performing a service not only for Turkey, but for the world as well. From our experience with the members of the Hizmet movement while we were in Turkey and also here in Boston, the first thing that strikes a visitor is the hospitality, the warmth, the great sense of welcome. We were invited into homes of volunteers. We shared meals with volunteers while we were in Turkey. Here in Boston as well, we've been invited to the big public iftar for Ramadan, which they organize here in Boston, but also to homes of our friends for iftar in our friends' home. And then overall, I think there is an openness, there is a willingness to dialogue, there is a curiosity about the world, but also we can see of all the people we met connected with Hizmet movement in Turkey and United States, everyone is very serious about their faith. And as faithful Christians ourselves, that is an inspiration for us as well, to see that people that are serious about their faith and they want to practice their faith, and it's something that we should also inspire us in our own faith. Speaking as a Roman Catholic, there is a parallel maybe between the Hizmet movement and what our Roman Catholic Church teaches us. We have a very strong social teaching in the church. It is expected of us to improve the community and to perform works of mercy and to engage in works of social justice. So for us, faith can never be private. It has to be expressed in the public sphere. It has to contribute to the good of the world. So I think this is also the attitude of the Hizmet movement by sponsoring social agencies. When we were in Turkey, we visited a social service called Kimse Yok Mu, or in English they say Helping Hand. So we visited the headquarters in Istanbul, and we heard about, for example, a lot of work that they did during a bad earthquake in Turkey. And this is very similar to Catholic organizations, international organizations in our church, like Catholic Relief Services and so forth. So it's something very familiar for us as Catholics, I think. Interfaith dialogue is absolutely important, and we've been fortunate here after we returned from Turkey to continue this interfaith dialogue in Boston. In fact, we have a small group in our church that meets once a month for interfaith prayer and interfaith dialogue, and we've been doing this now with local members of the Hizmet movement here in Boston for a year and a half or so, and we've really come to know each other as people. And once you get to know each other, then you can talk about the more difficult questions. It becomes more than just a surface conversation. So I think it's been very enriching for us, and I hope for our Turkish friends. And I know that in the Quran, I have to paraphrase in English, but there's a part of the Quran that says, God says, if we had willed, we would have made you all one religion, but we have given you different traditions so that you can compete with each other in good works. And the more we can talk to each other and understand each other's faith, the more we can work together and the more we can appreciate each other. I hope that through interfaith dialogue we can start to address some social problems. I know that here in Boston, Turkish Cultural Center and Peace Islands Institute are making efforts in that area. That Peace Islands Institute here in Boston sponsors various lectures, and they bring in experts to speak on various subjects of public concern. And for us as private individuals, we can only act maybe on a very small level here locally, but on a more global scale, I would like to see, for example, Hizmet movement working with other world religions such as the Catholic Church to work together on social issues, and especially world poverty, because right now in our church we have our Pope Francis, who is lifting up the cause of the poor very much. So I hope that maybe we can work together more on those issues. And we have had people from our congregation, well, not exactly saying this isn't going to work, but for a lot of people it's not a high priority. They just kind of step back and they let other people do this. But I think the interfaith dialogue is very important because it's a way for us to understand each other. But I would also say that to have a successful interfaith dialogue, the participants have to be strong in their own faith. We are not trying to convert each other. We are trying to understand each other. And I think as Christians in dialogue with Muslims, we can understand things about our own Christian faith that maybe we didn't see before. You know, there is a lot of writing in the Quran about Prophet Jesus. There's a lot of writing in the Quran about Mary, the mother of Jesus. And it gives us things to think about. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult thought, but it enriches us in our own faith and gives us an understanding of the other faiths. So I think this is very important, and I wish more people were open to this, because in the end, you can become stronger in your own faith, I believe. When we were in Turkey, as I said, we visited several private schools affiliated with Hizmet movement, but we also got a sense of the entire Turkish educational system a little bit. And I think that there is a great emphasis in Turkish culture in general on education, and there are many, many universities, but we found that it's difficult for public universities to meet the demand from everyone in the country. So I think these private universities that are sponsored by Hizmet movement are a great service to Turkey and the schools that they sponsor overseas as well. When we were visiting Turkey in 2008, as I said, we visited Fatih University, and at that time when we were in Konya, they were talking about opening another private university. I don't know whether now maybe it's open, but they told us in Konya there is University of Konya, which is public sponsored, and it's huge, huge. I think maybe 30,000, 40,000 students or something like that. And still, it's not enough places for the people that want to go into university. So we need this kind of, in English, we would say Hizmet is a civil society movement, and these are necessary for a healthy society, I think, because the government can't do everything. They need to cooperate with the civil society movements as well. I think, yes, the Hizmet movement does a good job. There's certainly a strong, strong emphasis on the sciences. In fact, most of our friends here in Boston that we know who are helping with Hizmet movement are in science, very advanced degrees at the first level universities here. But I think the philosophy of Mr. Gülen and the Hizmet movement, as I understand it, it brings more to education than just the basic science, because there's a faith component and an emphasis on reaching out and having dialogue with people of other faiths, so that you can bring the human side to your research and to your science and think about how is your research going to benefit the world. So I think it's a good balance, I hope. We often see if there is a need around the world, our Turkish Cultural Center in Boston will send a broadcast email and ask people to contribute. So I think it's very active, and they have a lot of volunteer support, as we try to do in our church. I think it's similar. I never saw myself any evidence of any hidden agenda when we were visiting Turkey, and at that time, it's 2008, so it's been a few years. At that time, there seemed to be a good level of cooperation between Hizmet volunteers and government of Turkey. I am not sure why the situation has changed, but I believe that for a healthy society, the government should have assistance from civil society movements like the Hizmet. Particularly when we were in Denizli, I remember meeting the volunteers, and it reminded me very much of here in the United States we have the Chamber of Commerce. It's a private organization, but they try to promote business, and different people from different companies can network with each other. That is not something the government can do all by itself. So it seemed to me sign of a healthy society that we had this large group of volunteers in Denizli that were very dedicated, and they were, they were trying to advance their business, of course, but they were also trying to perform a service to the society, and I think that's something that's healthy in a society.
We are a global society, and especially for the Gülen movement, because it leads in education, because it leads in interfaith dialogue, it's an important voice in this country particularly, so this country can fully understand and really embrace the Islamic culture.
I find that the Hizmet movement is very compatible with a number of different religions on a worldwide basis. They're very rational, they're very dedicated, they're very faithful, they're very caring. I think I enjoy being around them.